It was high summer, the kind where the sun hung heavy and slow in the sky like it was lazy from too many hot afternoons. The dust along the Wyoming Trail rose like ghost dancers, twisting in the golden light. Jesse Callahan, saddle-worn and silent, rode his paint gelding along the dry fence line that marked the outer edge of the old Ridgway homestead. He wasn't looking for company. Hadn't been for years now. Folks around town said he'd gone soft in the heart after losing his kin to fever and fire, and maybe there was truth in it. But Jesse never cared for gossip. He cared for his horse, his land, and the quiet. That day, he had a mind to check the stream beds for coyotes, maybe mend a busted post near the southern gate. He didn't expect to see a little girl sitting cross-legged in the dust by the watering trough. She looked no more than 6, maybe 7. Her cheeks smudged and her dress torn at the hem. A straw bonnet sat askew on her head, and in her lap, a scrawny kitten purred like it had known her its whole life. Jesse pulled back on the reins. "You lost, little miss?" The girl didn't startle. She just looked up at him with wide hazel eyes that held too much knowing for someone so young. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a crumpled paper, and held it up like it was the deed to a gold mine. "You Jesse Callahan?" she asked. He shifted in the saddle, eyes narrowing. "Depends on who's a-skinned." "My name's Addie," she said, rising to her feet. "Mama says if I get lost, I should find a man with kind eyes and a strong back, and that'd be you." "Well now," Jesse muttered, dismounting. "That's mighty particular advice." She handed him the paper. He unfolded it slow, careful-like. It was a letter, handwritten in a graceful scrawl. And as his eyes scanned the words, his heart did something it hadn't done in years. It kicked hard, like a bronc fresh out the chute. The letter was from a woman named Evelyn Harper. She claimed to be a widow, newly settled at the edge of town with a patch of land she couldn't quite wrangle on her own. She'd heard Jesse was honest, quiet, and good with fences and children. She offered food and board in exchange for help. Nothing more, she said, unless the Lord or fate saw fit. At the bottom, in a child's hand, were the words, "Please marry my mama. She needs someone strong. I picked you. Love, Addie." Jesse folded the letter with slow hands and looked back down at the girl. "And what makes you think I'd say yes to such a thing?" Addie shrugged. "Mama says the world don't owe us nothing. But I figure sometimes folks get picked by people smaller than them, 'cause they forget how to choose for themselves." Jesse scratched his jaw. It had been 5 summers since anyone had looked at him like he mattered. 5 summers since a warm voice filled his porch, or laughter curled up the steps like smoke from a cook fire. He looked toward the Ridgway Trail, toward the sun hanging low over the hills. "Well then," he said, voice rough, "you best show me the way home." And with that, the lonely cowboy turned his horse toward the future he didn't even know he was missing, led by a girl with too much dust on her dress and too much heart in her whisper. The trail from Ridgway's Creek to the Harper place weren't long, but it sure felt like miles to Jesse. Every hoofbeat stirred up more than dust. It stirred memories, regrets, and the sort of ache a man keeps behind his ribs and pretends ain't there. Addie walked beside him, swinging a stick like a sword, her kitten cradled in the crook of her arm. She chattered about chickens and her ma's biscuits, about how the garden only grew crooked carrots this year, and how sometimes her mama cried when she thought no one could hear. "She don't like a skin for help," Addie said, looking up at Jesse. "But I reckon sometimes help don't wait to be asked." He didn't say nothing, just nodded slow, jaw clenched tight. When they crested the last hill, Jesse saw it, a small, whitewashed house with a porch gone a little saggy and paint peeling like bark from a dry tree. But the garden was neat, with rows of beans, squash, and tomatoes leaning on twine. A rooster strutted near the fence like he owned the place, and a tattered curtain fluttered in the open window. Then she stepped out. Evelyn Harper wasn't the kind of beauty that knocked a man flat. She was the kind that settled in your bones, the kind of pretty that stayed. Her auburn hair was pulled back, wisp sticking to her cheeks from the summer heat. She wore a patched apron over a faded blue dress, flour dust in her hands. She saw Addie, then Jesse, and for a second, her face lit up, just for a second. Then it shuddered, guarded like a poker player with a bad hand. "Addie!" she called, wiping her hands. You were supposed to stay near the house. I found him, Mama. Addie beamed, puffing up. The man from the letter. Jesse Callahan. Jesse tipped his hat. Ma'am. Evelyn looked like she wanted to say 3 things at once, but all that came out was, you came. I reckon your daughter's persuasive, he replied. She laughed, soft and surprised. She always is. There was an awkward silence then, heavy as a storm about to break. Finally, Evelyn stepped aside. Well, you might as well come in. Hope you like peach pie, Mr. Callahan. I like honest work and strong coffee, he said, tying his horse. But pie'll do just fine. Inside, the place smelled like warm bread and lavender soap. The floor was swept clean, though the boards creaked in protest with every step. A pie cooled on the windowsill, and the table was set for 2. I wasn't expecting company, Evelyn said, noticing Jesse's glance. Looks like you were half expecting someone, he said dryly. She flushed. I set the table that way for hope. Jesse didn't answer, but something softened in his face. He looked around, at the worn quilt on the couch, the Bible on the mantel, the hand-stitched curtains. This wasn't just a house. It was a home trying real hard to stay one. After pie and silence, and a bit of small talk that circled around their real thoughts like vultures over a carcass, Jesse stood. I can patch that fence, he said, jerking his chin toward the window. And that roof's gonna leak next time it rains. Evelyn looked at him, eyes narrowing just a little. I didn't ask for charity. Ain't off-airing it, he replied. Off-airing hands and skill, in exchange for a porch to rest under and maybe a square meal now and then. She studied him a moment, then nodded. Fair enough. But as he stepped onto the porch to fetch his gear, Addie appeared beside him like a shadow. She tugged his sleeve and whispered, She likes roses. Just in case you want to bring her something nice. Jesse looked down at her, then toward the horizon. He hadn't brought flowers in over a decade, but for some reason he made a quiet promise to himself. If he stayed long enough to see the ridge bloom again, he'd bring her the finest wild rose he could find. Jesse took to the work like a man starved for purpose. That fence out back got new rails within 2 days. The hen house got patched. He even fixed the porch step Addie had tripped on twice that week. All the while, Evelyn Harper watched him from a kitchen window, like a woman unsure whether to hope or brace for heartbreak. He didn't talk much, not unless spoken to, but Addie filled the silences like music fills a chapel. She trailed after Jesse, asking questions about horses, knots, stars. He never scolded her, just showed her, quiet and patient, like someone teaching a foal to trust the rope. You always this quiet? She asked once, her leg swinging off the fence. Jesse gave her a side glance, one brow raised. You always ask so many questions. She grinned. Mama says I got the soul of a writer. I think I just got a lot of curiosity. That night, the sky shifted. The wind turned humid and restless. Jesse sniffed the air, his hand pausing mid-swing with the hammer. Storm's coming, he muttered. Evelyn stepped out onto the porch. We get the loud kind in these parts. Thunder that shakes the rafters. You got a cellar? Route 1 under the kitchen. Never needed it before. You might tonight. And sure enough, by sundown, the sky had gone black. Lightning cracked across the prairie like it was splitting the world clean in 2. Jesse helped Evelyn haul down dry goods and blankets, while Addie clung to her kitten and asked if God was mad. No, little one, Jesse said gently, settling a hand on her head. This is just how the sky lets off steam. They sat in that cramped root cellar, candle flickering, storm raging, above like Judgment Day. And somewhere in the hush between thunder and the drip of water from the rafters, Jesse told them about the fire. My wife, she passed when our cabin caught, he said, voice low. I was out mending a fence. Came back to ash and silence. Evelyn's eyes went soft, her hand tightening around Addie's shoulder. I'm sorry, she whispered. Jesse just nodded. A man don't forget the sound of a home gone, nor the feeling of not savon who mattered most. Silence fell then, deep and thick. Addie spoke up, voice small. Mama says loss is like a hole in your chest that fills with wind every time you breathe. "That's mighty wise," Jessie said. "She knows 'cause Papa didn't come back from the war," Addie added. "She don't talk about it, but I hear her sometimes." Evelyn's eyes closed, pain flashing across her face like lightning through the slats. Jessie didn't press. Some stories a soul only tells when the words won't stay down no more. The storm passed by morning, leaving the world washed clean. Chickens strutted like nothing happened. The beans stood straighter somehow, like even they were grateful for the drink. But something had shifted. Evelyn brought Jessie fresh coffee on the porch, her fingers brushing his as she handed over the cup. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For staying." He looked out across the sun-splashed fields, then back at her. "I reckon I ain't going nowhere. Not just yet." Their eyes held a moment too long, until Addie burst through the door chasing her kitten, breaking the spell like a dropped dish. But Jessie smiled, because for the first time in a long while, he felt like maybe, just maybe, the wind in his chest wasn't grief no more. Maybe it was something bloomier. Hope, perhaps. Summer rolled on like a lazy stream, days long, hot, and dusted with bees humming round the squash blossoms. Jessie fixed the barn roof, dug a new well line, and even rigged up a swing in the oak for Addie, who hollered with joy every time her bare feet scraped the sky. Evelyn, for her part, started baking again. Not just bread, but little things. Cornbread with honey, apple fritters, pies with extra cinnamon. Jessie never said a word about it, but he always finished every bite. On a Saturday, word came that the town social was on, the kind held out behind the church with fiddle music and pie contests and enough sweet tea to float a wagon. Evelyn hadn't been in years. "I can't just show up," she said, fussing with her dress. "What'll folks say?" "They'll say you brought the best peach pie in 3 counties," Jessie drawled from the porch, "and that your daughter dances better than any preacher's boy alive." Evelyn gave him a look. "You're not going, are you?" "I was invited," he said, nodding toward Addie, who stood proudly in a pair of 2 big boots and a flower crown of dandelions. "She said I gotta dance at least once, and I don't reckon I've ever said no to a lady that persistent." That night, they hitched the wagon and rolled into town. Jessie wore his cleanest shirt, still a bit wrinkled from riding, but tucked in best he could. Evelyn had her hair braided back, with a pin Jessie hadn't seen before, shaped like a silver swallow. Addie wore yellow, the kind that made her look like sunshine in a twirl. The town buzzed with fiddle and laughter. The preacher's boy did try to dance with Addie, and Jessie tipped his hat as he watched her correct his steps with bossy delight. Evelyn stood beside Jessie, arms crossed, eyes watching her daughter with soft pride. "She's got your spark," Jessie said. "She's got too much of it sometimes." "I'd rather a girl with fire than fear," he said, then added quietly, "World's too cold otherwise." A slow song started, a waltz of sorts. A few couples turned, uncertain in their steps. Jessie cleared his throat. "I ain't much for dancing, but I could try." Evelyn's brow arched. "You're offering to make a fool of yourself." He nodded. "For a good cause." She stepped closer. Her hand slid into his, warm, steady, and just a touch nervous. They danced slow, under paper lanterns strung across the yard. The night smelled of lilacs and churned up dirt, and the stars winked down like they approved. Jessie's steps were stiff at first, but Evelyn led without making a fuss. They didn't talk. Didn't need to. Her breath was steady. His was not. When the song ended, he held her hand a second longer than needed. She didn't pull away. Back at the house, under a sky velvet black and thick with crickets, Evelyn walked Jessie to his bunk out in the tack room. She paused on the step. "You danced well, Jessie Callahan. I followed your lead." She smiled. Sometimes that's the trick to love, knowing when to follow and when to hold steady. Jessie stared at her a moment, then said, "That a hint?" "Just a truth." And with that, she turned, the porch light painting her hair gold as she stepped inside. He stood there long after, hat in hand, watching the door as if it might open again. But it didn't, and still the air was sweeter than usual. And his heart, well, it beat a little louder beneath that work-worn shirt. The days after the dance seemed wrapped in warm light, the kind that makes a man forget he ever knew loneliness. Jesse rose early, split wood, checked the garden rows, and mended the Harper place like it were his own. Evelyn began humming again, simple tunes while she kneaded dough or brushed Addie's hair on the porch. One afternoon, Jesse found an old apple tree at the back of the property, gnarled and half dead, but bearing a few stubborn fruits. He picked the best of 'em, brought 'em in his hat like offerings to a queen. "Thought these might suit your next pie," he said. Evelyn took them, fingers brushing his. "They'll be perfect." But not all was pie and peaches. That same week, word came down the ridge. Evelyn's late husband's brother, Tom Harper, was poking around town again. Big man, full of bluster and bad debt. He'd tried laying claim to the land after James died, but Evelyn had shut him out with a shotgun and a prayer. "He's not dangerous," she told Jesse. "Just greedy." But Jesse didn't like the way her hands trembled after saying it. "You want me to ride out, have a word?" he asked, quiet but firm. "No, that's not your fight." Jesse frowned. "You sure? I got a way of making words stick." Evelyn smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "It's not your burden." Later that night, Jesse sat by the fence under the stars, whittling a bit of cedar. The piece in his hand was slowly taquine, the shape of a horse's head. He had a mind to give it to Addie once it was right. Evelyn came out in her shawl, arms crossed against the cool air. "You don't sleep?" she asked. "I do," Jesse said. "But the stars don't look this good in dreams." She sat beside him on the step, silent for a while. "James wasn't a cruel man," she said at last. "But he wasn't soft either. He saw life as a ledger. You owed, or you were owed." Jesse didn't speak, just listened, let her words stretch and settle like dew on grass. "I think he loved Addie," she continued, "but not in the way that counts. He wasn't there. He left more often than he stayed. And when he died, I didn't grieve the way I thought I should. I felt free." Jesse set the carving down. Sometimes freedom costs grief, and sometimes grief's just proof you carried more than your share. She turned her face to him, eyes shining in the starlight. "You say things like they've already lived a lifetime. I reckon some days feel that long." Then she leaned in slow, careful as a deer drinking at dawn, and kissed him, just once, soft and brief, like a question asked without words. She pulled back quick, embarrassed. I shouldn't have." But Jesse caught her hand, held it firm. "You should have," he said. "You did." Addie, watching from her upstairs window, clutched her quilt to her chest and whispered to her kitten, "I told you he was the one." The kiss didn't change everything, but it changed enough. Jesse and Evelyn moved quieter around each other now, like folks not wanting to spook the stillness. There were more shared looks, more hands brushed across door frames, more smiles that stopped just short of promises. Then Tom Harper rode in. It was a Wednesday, hot, dry, with the sky hanging low like it was listening. Jesse was out back oiling the hinges on the barn when the sound of hooves cracked the air like a whip. He stepped out slow, rag still in hand. Tom sat atop a sweat-lathered bay, his wide frame wrapped in a coat he didn't need and confidence he hadn't earned. His hat was pushed back, showing a scar Jesse figured he gave himself trying to act tough. "Well now," Tom drawled, swinging down from the saddle. "Ain't you the hired help?" Jesse said nothing, just watched. Tom looked past him toward the porch. "Heard my sister-in-law been taking charity from stray dogs." "That's your only warning," Jesse said flat. "Call her that again. You'll lose teeth." Tom snorted. "I'm here legal-like. Come to claim what's mine. This land ain't yours. It was my brother's. And your brother left it to Evelyn." Tom's eyes narrowed. "A woman can't hold land. Not out here. It'll be swallowed up or signed away. She needs protection." "She's got it," Jesse said, taking a slow step forward. Tom's hand twitched toward his belt. Not the gun, just the buckle. A bluff. Jesse didn't blink. "Go on now." Tom stared hard. But Jesse was a wall, and he knew better than to run at stone. "You best tell her I'll be back come Sunday, with paperwork and men who ain't as polite." He mounted up and rode off, spitting dust. That night, Evelyn didn't cry. She didn't fret either. She just stood at the window, arms folded. "I thought I was done with him," she whispered. "You are," Jesse said from the porch. "He just don't know it yet." She turned, eyes hard. "He's right about the deed. I never got it signed after James passed. I was scared. Of Tom, of the bank, of losing everything. But I've been scared long enough." Jesse stepped close, placed a calloused hand on her shoulder. "We'll fix it. We'll go to the clerk. Make it legal." Her breath caught. "We." He nodded. "If you'll have me by your side." She stared up at him, then leaned her forehead to his chest. "I already do." From the stairwell, Addie peeked around the corner, grinning so wide she near lost her balance. The kitten meowed in protest. She whispered, "Almost there, Mama." They rode into town at sunrise, the kind of summer morning where even the breeze felt like a blessing. Jesse wore his trail-worn coat and his best boots. Evelyn sat tall beside him, hands folded in her lap, her hair tied back neat and fierce. Addie bounced in the back of the wagon, a ribbon in her hair and a dandelion crown clutched in both fists. The courthouse sat squat and sun-bleached, the steps cracked from years of storms and small-town battles. Jesse helped Evelyn down, his hand lingering a heartbeat longer than it needed to. She let it. Inside, the clerk squinted over the deed, like it was the first legal thing he'd seen all week. "You're lucky," he said, thumbing through the papers. "With Tom Harper pushing claims, if you'd waited much longer." "We didn't," Jesse said. The man glanced up, nodded, and pulled out the inkwell. Evelyn signed first, her hand steady, her name sure. Then Jesse signed, adding his mark beside hers not for ownership, but as witness, as promise. The clerk stamped the paper. The sound echoed like a shot. "Land's yours now," he said. "Fair and square." As they stepped back into the morning light, the town seemed to pause. Folks who'd whispered and speculated now watched them with fresh eyes. Jesse had always been a ghost, a shadow on the trail. But now he stood beside Evelyn Harper, solid, certain, and unafraid. They headed to the general store next. Addie skipped ahead, pointing at bolts of ribbon and jars of candy. "I got a nickel," she declared proudly. Evelyn smiled, leaning close to Jesse. "She's never had anyone buy her a new dress." "Not really." "Then maybe it's time," Jesse said, tossing a silver coin on the counter. The shopkeep grinned. "Big day." Evelyn nodded. "We're celebrating." Papers signed. "About time," the woman said, bagging the goods. "You two look like a matched pair." They walked out with supplies and a sack of sweets, but the sweetest thing was the way Evelyn's hand found Jesse's and stayed there. That night, back at the homestead, Jesse carved something by lamplight. Took him near 2 hours, but when he finished, it was smooth and warm, an old cedar band, small enough to fit Evelyn's finger. He found her on the porch, looking out over the fields. "I ain't got much," he said, offering it at his palm, "but I made it with my own hands. And it ain't meant to bind, it's meant to promise." Evelyn stared at it a long moment. Then she took it, slipped it on, and said, "Yes." No fanfare, no bouquet, just one word, honest and full. From the window above, Addie hooped and hollered like it was the 4th of July. "You hear that?" she shouted to the kitten. "He's staying." And Jesse Callahan smiled wider than he had in 10 long years. 3 days after Jesse gave Evelyn that cedar ring, the piece they'd built found itself tested. Tom Harper came back. This time, he didn't ride alone. 2 men flanked him. Hired muscle, one with a scar down his cheek, and the other chewing tobacco like it owed him money. They rode in fast, loud, stirring dust like buzzards on fresh kill. Evelyn was pulling clothes from the line when she saw him. Her spine went stiff, but she didn't flinch. Jesse was already on the porch, rifle across his knees like he'd been expecting company. Tom dismounted with a sneer. "Heard you signed papers." "We did," Evelyn said. "Too bad," Tom said. "I brought a claim of my own. Clerk's office says they lost your husband's will. Without that, your signature don't mean spit." "Get off my land," Jesse said, rising slow. Tom chuckled, mean and greasy. "Or what, cowboy? You think that rifle makes you the law?" I don't need to be the law, Jesse said, stepping down from the porch. Just need to be faster in you. Scarface and Chewer shifted in their saddles, hands on their hips. But they weren't ready, not like Jesse. He raised that rifle slow, steady. You got 3 seconds. Tom laughed. You wouldn't dare. 1, Jesse said. The laughter died. 2. Scarface leaned back in the saddle. Boss, maybe we. 3. Tom held up his hands. All right. Darn fool, fine. I'll leave. But before he turned, he looked Evelyn square. This ain't over. Evelyn didn't blink. It is for you. They watched as the 3 men rode out, smaller with every hoofbeat. Addie ran out from behind the chicken coop, breathless. Mama. He didn't even shoot. Jesse just looked at him, and he ran. Jesse leaned the rifle back on the porch and wiped sweat from his brow. Ain't always about bullets, he said. Sometimes it's about standing firm. Evelyn stepped beside him. Thank you. He looked at her, then at Addie, then at the wide stretch of land behind him. This place, it's home now. And I don't run from home. Later that night, as the moon bathed the fields in silver and the crickets sang low, Jesse sat beside Evelyn on the porch swing, Addie fast asleep upstairs. He said, I've lived a lot of places, but this is the first one that feels like something worth protecting. She laid her head on his shoulder. It's worth every fight. And for the first time in a long time, Jesse Callahan believed the good things in life might just be his to keep. The days that followed were peaceful in that quiet kind of way that comes after a storm, when the land breathes again and the birds sing louder just to make sure the sky ain't broken. Evelyn and Jesse moved like they'd always been meant to. Mornings found them side by side, pulling weeds, milking the goat, laughing at Addie's tall tales about talking cats and fence-post pirates. Jesse built her a little desk out of pine wood and carved her name into the top. You think I can learn to write stories? Addie asked, ink smudged on her chin. Jesse chuckled. Darlin', you've been writing stories since the day you opened your mouth. One evening, as the sun dipped low, casting gold across the ridge, Jesse took Evelyn's hand and led her down to the wildflower field beyond the creek, the same one Addie had once gathered dandelions from. He stopped near a cluster of bluebells and turned to her, voice low. I didn't get to ask the proper way. She tilted her head. Ask what? Jesse dropped to one knee. Not fancy, not showy, just a man in worn boots and love in his eyes. He held out a ring, simple gold, bought quiet from a traveling peddler just 2 days back. I ain't got much, he said, but I got strong hands, a quiet heart, and the kind of love that don't quit. Evelyn Harper, would you marry me proper? Evelyn's breath caught, then tears, then laughter, light and bright and full. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Jesse Callahan. Behind them, a twig snapped. They turned to see Addie, grinning from ear to ear. The kitten curled in her arms like royalty. I knew it, she squealed. Can I be the flower girl and the preacher? Evelyn laughed, brushing hair from her daughter's face. You can be whatever you want. They went 2 Sundays later, behind the house with the whole town watching. Some came for the pie. Most came for the story. But they all stayed for the love that bloomed under a wide sky and wild sun. Addie, in her yellow dress, stood tall between them, one hand holding the kitten and the other clutched around her mama's fingers. When the vows were said and Jesse kissed Evelyn, slow, tender, like he meant to memorize it, Addie whispered, Told you he was the one, Mama. The wedding day faded into twilight, and the ridge glowed soft with lanterns strung between fence posts. The guests trickled off, wagons creaking back toward town, leaving behind laughter echoes and a stack of empty pie tins. Jesse and Evelyn sat on the porch swing, Addie asleep upstairs, curled in quilts and dreams of ponies and Sunday cake. The kitten purred beside her like a lullaby. The air was still, warm with memory. Evelyn rested her head on Jesse's shoulder. You ever think you'd end up here? She asked. No, ma'am, Jesse replied. I thought I was bound for silence and trail dust. Evelyn reached for his hand. And now, he squeezed her fingers gently. Now I reckon I found what all the miles were for. The land around them had changed, not in shape, but in spirit. The garden rows were taller, the porch brighter. Even the old apple tree seemed to stand a bit prouder. But it wasn't just the place that bloomed. Jessie had begun teaching Addie how to saddle her own pony, a gift from a rancher friend who heard about the wedding and showed up with a filly and a wink. Evelyn had started reading again, old novels and letters once tucked away. And every night, they gathered around the hearth, no matter how tired, no matter how long the day. One evening, Addie looked up from her drawing, scribbles of flowers, stars, and a stick figure family. "Mama," she asked. "Yes, baby." "Do you think Papa would have liked Jessie?" Evelyn paused, then leaned down and kissed her daughter's brow. "I think your papa would be real proud of how brave you were, and I think he'd be glad you chose someone good." Addie nodded. "I think Jessie was always supposed to find us." Later that night, with the fire low and the windows open to the soft rustle of prairie wind, Jessie tucked Addie in and turned to find Evelyn watching him from the hallway. "You're good with her," she whispered. "She makes it easy," he said, brushing a kiss to Evelyn's temple. "No," she replied, her voice thick with gratitude. "You make it easy. For both of us." And as the stars turned overhead and the wind sighed through the trees, Jesse Callahan, once a wanderer, once a ghost, finally laid his hat down for good. Not because he had nowhere else to be, but because for the first time in a long, long while, he was already home,